Is a comic book industry just kind of a death cult, just waiting to spiral down to the end? Well, not exactly, but it's kind of fun to use those kind of words. But let's talk about it. Hey, a while back I was on Larry's show, and we talked about kind of the sense of fatalism that exists within the comic book industry at times. And he coined the phrase, it's like a death cult kind of mentality. And it's a it's a good one. It does describe kind of the mood and certainly how it feels sometimes. But I want to peel that back. I want to take a couple steps back from that because unfortunately, since that time, that comment actually got picked up by a couple of much bigger, much bigger YouTube channels that have started to kind of give this sense of the comic industry is just trying to kill itself or trying to die. And I think that there's that kind of, again, it's very dramatic. It sounds fun, but it doesn't really describe what's going on well. And it also it sounds like the same thing we started with, but has actually taken things a couple steps kind of further and sideways. So let me explain. So my original point and kind of Larry's in his show was that there's this, again, a sense of fatalism, the sense that things are going to die anyway, so why try? And that's different from actively trying to kill the industry or trying to fail. That's more a sense of you don't see any hope. So think about like the publishing industry, or better yet, if you go to a bookstore, particularly like a Barnes and Noble, and you talk to one of the managers there, there is this sense that they are up against really big odds, that Amazon's coming for them, that the business, the brick and mortar is in trouble, and they're in trouble, and they're not wrong. But there's a sense of kind of anxiety that ultimately turns to hopelessness in a lot of cases. If you can't, as a person mentally, if you can't figure out a way out of something, eventually your kind of your body self-destruct mechanism kind of kicks in, and you start just kind of working to survive. It's a problem that people have when they that they've had it at different eras, different times in life, where you get somebody who loses hope, loses sight of how things can get better, and so they just kind of go through the motions until eventually they die. And again, that's even there. I'm using a lot of very dramatic language, but that's still several shades different, and the mentality is very different from somebody who's actually trying to cause something to die. And to be clear, I don't believe for a second that anybody inside the comic industry is a saboteur, trying to deliberately cause it to die. And I also don't think there are people in the business who are like my way or the highway. It's got to be, my brand of politics, my brand of comic writing, or nothing. Nobody gets it. It's not quite that way as well, because the people, even the people who are saying, and you can see them there, it's not a secret, who say, you got to get with a program, or you gotta believe what we believe, or those kinds of statements, which are ludicrous. But they're saying it not from a perspective of, and if you don't, we'll burn the whole industry down. They're saying it because they believe they're in power. They believe that they will win. They believe that their way will be the way, and their way will win. Nobody sits on top of a losing hand and says, "You all got to join me," or "Screw it, I'll burn this mother down." That's not how it is. People only get there when they see no hope, when they're ejecting themselves from the business. And you do see this with comic creators who have come to the conclusion that they've been blacklisted, that they're not going to get anywhere, and they do start talking more in terms of, we got to burn this whole thing down and screw it. You see kind of the some of the interviews that Chelsea Kane has given around kind of both her exit from Marvel, and then later the Man-Eater's book. I forget all about the trans stuff and the other kind of controversies that got wrapped up in there, but just the screw it. I may be violating some NDAs. I may be never able to work from the company again, but screw it. And that's true a bit with Cena Grace as well. He's kind of come to the conclusion of, screw it. I'm just going to call this company cowards, and and burn it down. But this is a person who has accepted in their mind they're not going to get more work there, or maybe they're just kind of immature and bitter, or both. Who knows? Actually, and anyone who says those kinds of things like let's just burn it down, that's an immature kind of silly person. And I realize as I'm saying this out loud that I've just insulted a bunch of YouTubers who'll take another crack at me. But it is true. I think if your mood and your behavior is like, if I can't have what I want, then nobody gets what they want. I mean, that's just, you're being a child. You're throwing a tantrum, no matter who you are, whether you're the head of Marvel, a creator who's been excommunicated, or some uh, crowd-funded comic person who's on YouTube, whatever. And those aren't, well, man, whatever. It doesn't matter who you are. That's a silly statement. So, but back to the industry a little bit, and it's very true that you get behavior that seems counterproductive to success. And what I mean by that is like you will see people who are, acting in a way that seems not in their best interest. That seems like it would cause damage to the company or to the line. And you have to look at who that person is. So in comics, keep in mind, and that's why I've done the video before about employment types. A lot of the creators are independent contractors. They're freelancers. So for a second, think about yourself, whatever you do for a living, and think about all the other people who might be listening right now. All 12 of us who are listening right now, whatever. Picture I'm a popular YouTuber with like thousands and thousands of viewers. Okay, so of those thousands of people, there's all types of careers and people at different stages in their life. But let's just look at the people who are employed. Some of them are employed for themselves. They run their own business. Maybe they are a contractor who needs that money, or maybe they have their own store, or maybe they run their own consulting firm, or whatever it happens to be. That person's in charge of their own business. And of those people who are in charge of their own business, they have employees. And of course, the person who's in charge of the business wants everybody engaged. They want people who are, showing up and passionate and care, and will do what it takes, work that extra mile. If there's something undone at the store, if a shipment comes in late to the store and the boxes arrive at 7 o'clock, and we were supposed to punch out at 7 o'clock, but the boxes just got here and it's going to be a big day tomorrow. Well, we're going to, just doesn't matter. We're going to stay that extra hour. We're going to unpack those boxes. We're going to tidy it up. And somebody spilled their coffee all over the floor. We're going to clean that up because it's our work. It's our space. And we want it to look clean and good. And that's taking ownership of your store, your career, your life, whatever it happens to be. And then there's others of you who are listening who maybe you work for somebody. Maybe you work in a corporation, at a desk. Maybe you work in a convenience store. Maybe you work at Target. Maybe you work, at McDonald's, wherever you might work. And some people will go into their job at McDonald's and they'll be like, you know what? I'm going to, try and do the best thing for the company. I'm going to show up on time. I'm going to cook the fries, and I'm not going to burn the fries. And if I burn the fries by accident, I'm going to feel kind of bad about that. Like, man, I just, they're not my fries, but I wasted somebody's money and food and inventory. So, I'm going to do a better job next time. I'm going to figure out how to cook those fries properly, and I'm going to do it the right way. And then there's other people who say, you know what, this is not my store. This is my job. I clock in, I clock out. If there's something that needs to be done at 7:05, but I'm supposed to clock out at 7, then I'll get to it tomorrow. It's 7:05. I'm done. And then everything in between, right? So with comics, as with a lot of jobs, when you have independent contractors, they're hired to do a job. If you're hired to come in and write this 4-issue cable storyline, then you're going to write the cable storyline. You're going to turn in your scripts. You're going to get your check. You're going to hopefully get another job, and you're going to move on with life. You probably are not going to go on. Well, I don't know. Probably you may not go on social media to defend, the Avengers. You may not, go into a comic store and help the store owner there buy comics and explain to them what's going on with Marvel. because you're an independent contractor. You were paid for a job, and that job was writing 4 issues of cable, and you're done. And there are all sorts of different people. There are people who take a bigger investment in the company and say, you know what, it isn't my, I'm not being paid to do this specifically, but a healthy company means a healthy check for me that I get every day. And then there's other people who are like, I get my check, I go. And in comics, there's more of the latter type. I mean, and that's not a slight against them. It's kind of a reality of the creative field, and it's also by the reality of how much people are getting paid. These people are also often getting paid low rates. They're at the bottom of creative work. If you're an artist, you will make more money doing contracting work for a game company than you will, drawing comics. So if you're paid at the bottom end of your field scale, and the company's giving you no long-term commitments, no incentives, if you do a great job, maybe you get another comic. If you do a, average job, maybe you get another comic. And if the outcome is about the same either way, then, what are you going to do? Most people will not put in that extra effort because there's no point to it. And then on top of that, comic book companies kind of send the subtle message, you know, the people who put in the extra effort are not always rewarded. There's a lot of stories, particularly with Marvel right now, that the people that have gone out and hustled and gotten their own interviews and gotten their own press and talked to the comic stores are given slaps on the hand by editors saying, "Don't do that. That's not your job. Run everything by us first." And so, if you're paid at the low end of your scale, and you have no long-term commitment, you have no assurance of a job after this one, and you're disciplined when you try and go outside your lane to do more, you're not going to do more. And when you have a business and an industry that's struggling, like comics is, you're going to do what is you're paid to do, and that's all. And so, why do I say all this? Well, it goes back to that kind of death cult fatalism mentality. Okay, so you have an industry with comics, and you have an increasing amount of people who are, doing, not a lot, let's say, to really push the business forward because they're not paid to, they're not incentivized, and in many cases, they're disciplined if they do try and push the business forward. And this is the result you get. So when you hear a lot of people saying, there are people and they're just trying to destroy comics, or they're just, hoping for it to die, it's not that they're hoping for it to die, it's that they're not paid to ensure that it lives. And that sounds like the same thing, but it's really not. It's a weird place. Like I've said a million times, comics are in a weird place. Time and time again, I'll say, regardless of everything else, there's not enough money in comics. More money in comics generates more behavior, more commitment to the staff, to the employees, to the contractors, generates better behavior. People act better, fight better, care more, do more when there's real stakes. And the best way for, there to ensure real stakes is by, paying people and putting that incentive in place. So is there a death cult in comics? No, not literally, but it feels like that figuratively. And is there a sense of fatalism? Absolutely. It comes in many forms. It comes from the forms of, well, print is dead, so why bother? It comes in the form of, well, I'm only contracted to do these 4 issues, and I'm not spending the time kissing up to the 2 or 3 editors that run a very tight clique, so why bother? Or it even cuts the other way, like, what, I don't have to put my best effort forward because, I am in good with the 4 or 5 editors that, make these decisions. So why bother? Why bother trying my best? Because it doesn't matter. I'm going to get that job either way. These are all factors of what goes on, and it is indicative of, in a lot of cases, an unhealthy industry, an industry that, struggles and is struggling a lot. So there you go. There's a long-winded way of kind of explaining it, and I hope this makes sense. I need to come at this topic kind of multiple times because it's important that as we look in the industry and we try and figure out ways to help it, that we're tackling the right things. We're tackling the actual problems and not kind of the over sensationalized dramatic side of the world. So there you go. Hope you like that. Let me know. Leave a comment, like, recommend, notify, subscribe, all that jazz. Follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch, and thank you for listening.